So my name is Israel Jukadar. I work for New Mexico State University. I've worked there for about 10 years, and I'm a research scientist. So I study vegetable production in many different ways. So we test salinity, we breed for different types of chili. We do selection for different types of chili. We also do agrivoltaics, which is growing crops under solar panels. And so I've been working with crops now for about 15 years and have worked all over the world with different groups of people. I worked for 2 years actually on the Navajo reservation where I was born in Tuba City. So I'm fairly familiar with what's happening on the Navajo Nation. And so I'm really excited to be here and to talk about drip irrigation for raised beds. So I just want to give everyone a disclaimer. I got really excited about this and there's lots of information. So some of it I'll have to go through quickly to get through time, but I know whenever I have watched these types of presentations, sometimes I just really want concrete, real information. And so that's what I try to get for everybody. So, oops, how do I move this screen? There we go. So irrigation, I think we're all familiar with what it is. It's an application of water to soil. It can be through rain-fed or artificial irrigation. Rain-fed irrigation is a natural application of water through rain. I know this is unheard of in our part of the world. It's like, what? People growing crops without any irrigation? And then artificial irrigation is the application of water through tubes, pumps, or sprays. Watering a garden is a must in the Southwest. So home irrigation, so the irrigations we have in our gardens, in our homes, it actually accounts for 50 to 65% of the annual municipal water use. So if you're on a well or if you're hauling water, really, if you have a garden, it's going to account for a lot of the water use, depending on the size and what type of plants you have and the type of irrigation. Typically, we apply water in excess. So when we have home gardens and we have home landscape, we usually are applying too much water. Some of the best practices that I want you to keep thinking about throughout this project or throughout this presentation is we really want to group plants together with similar water needs, right? So we don't want to have a cactus growing on the same line as a chili, and we don't want to have a tree growing on the same line as a vegetable. All right, so we want to be able to separate these things out. We need to schedule irrigation depending on the needs. I know myself, I do a lot of personal farming and gardening, and usually I just set up an irrigation schedule and I just leave it. And this is not an appropriate way to do it because we really want to make sure we're watering according to need. And we want to examine our irrigation monthly to repair any breaks and clean any clogs, because those can really cause a lot of water loss. So there's a lot of different types of irrigation. There's surface irrigation, which was typically used throughout the Southwest for up until about maybe 40 years ago. Localized irrigation, where we're just putting, maybe it can be on the surface, or it can be in pots where we're just directly watering through some kind of source that is, the water is right there, whether we have to fill it up. There's drip irrigation, which we're going to be talking about today. So I'm not going to go too much into that right now. There's sprinkler irrigation, center pivot irrigation, lateral move irrigation, sub irrigation, and manual irrigation. So manual irrigation happens a lot in the home setting where we just kind of spray water on plants. Sub irrigation is where we're putting some kind of irrigation line underneath the ground. And the lateral move, you can see it here on the top. What happens is these wheels move slowly and there's either some type of sprinkler going across here, and the center pivots move around in circles. In Farmington, there's a lot of center pivots on the Nappy farm. So what is drip irrigation? Drip irrigation actually initially started in Germany, and it's a technology that uses a network of plastic pipes to carry water directly to the plants. It's an efficient use of water. It can be automated. Sometimes it can be costly. So in no way am I saying drip irrigation is the perfect solution for everybody. There are some pros and cons with it. It must be managed to avoid leaking and or plugging. This is a big job, and but it can give a precise application of water to reduce water use, which is really, at this point, we don't really have any choice. We really need to start to reduce our water use so that way we can conserve it for the future. One thing that is usually associated with drip irrigation is a salt buildup. So when we use a flood irrigation system, that flood water is able to leach all of the salts from the top part of the soil. But with drip irrigation, this is not as possible. So, but there are some ways we can deal with that, and we're going to talk about that. So what do you need to set up a drip irrigation system? You need to think about first, what water source will you be using? Is it municipal water? Is it well water? Is it collected rainwater? What type of hardware do you want? What do you have access to? And this is a huge deal. Like, what do we actually have access to? There are microtubes, drip tape, PC drip line with emitters, PC drip line without emitters. We're going to go through all this. So you're like, I don't even know what any of that is. That's all right. And then what type of system do you want? I just put here gravity fed because ultimately that's, you either have a system that's hooked up to some kind of pressurized source, or you have something that's being moved by gravity. So when we look at the water sources that are available to us, and there are other water sources that I don't have listed here that I'll talk about briefly. So there's municipal water. It's particulate free, so there's not a lot of small, hopefully there's not a lot of small, soil particulates in it or any kind of debris. It usually has very high pressure. Coming from an outside spigot is usually very high pressure, but it can have a lot of calcium in it. Well water, well, the pressure depends on the well, and the calcium and salt levels can be slightly higher with well water, but it really depends on the quality and the depth of your well. There's collected rainwater. Usually this is low pressure. Obviously you're collecting it in a barrel or some kind of bin or container. There is no calcium or salt associated with rainwater unless sometimes people set up rainwater catchment systems where it's running over the ground into some lower portion of the ground. And so if it's running over the ground into a basin, sometimes it can collect calcium or salt, and it may have particulates. You can also have pond water, lake water, river water. Again, these three sources that are naturally occurring may have more particulates because they are out in nature, and there can be animal feces. There can be a lot of different things associated with pond, lake, or river water. But it usually has a little bit less calcium, and depending on where you're located, it can have less salt. So some of the terminology we sort of need to think about during this is PSI, and that's pounds per square inch. So that's the force exerted over an object or a surface area. So when we think about pounds per square inch with water, it's really about forcing the water against something, all right? So how strong is the water when it is exerting force over an object? Flow rate is the amount of water that moves through or is emitted from your water source. It's usually measured in gallons GPH, which is gallons per hour, or GPM, which is gallons per minute. Okay, an emitter is an end device which delivers water to plants in a specific manner. So we have online emitters. So this is not the only type of online emitter, but see, you can see that this emitter is on top of the drip line. And then we have inline emitters. And so there's emitters. This picture is slightly deceiving, but they're just trying to show you the emitter behind the drip tape. So in a real life situation, you wouldn't see the screen patch. It's actually within the tube itself. So here's some more terminology. I apologize, but to really get into drip irrigation, there's a lot of things we need to know. So initially there's the pump. This doesn't necessarily have to be a pump. It can be your spigot in your house, on the outside of your house. It can be a valve at a well. It can be a valve that's within the ground. Whatever your water source is, or it can be even a pump that's connected to a pond or a river. Okay, you can have a fertilizer injector. Again, that is not a must, but we're going to talk about it. A filter, not a must. We can talk about it. Really, none of this stuff is a must. That's the nice thing about drip irrigation. You can make it as simple or as complicated as you want. And once you get into it, it's actually really fun. Well, I mean, I guess I'm a drip irrigation nerd, so it can be really fun to figure things out. So you have a main line here. And then you can also have a sub main line. So this is where all the drip lines are. Typically, unless you need to have different valves or different on and off zones, typically the laterals, which are the drip lines, are connected to the main. Okay, they can be. But if you need to have just this zone watering and just this zone watering, then you can have sub main lines. Okay, this is the main line flush, which is where you would open this to let water come out to clean the system. And then at the end of these are drip line flush valves. Doesn't really have to be fancy, just any way to open up the bottom so you can clean out the drip lines. All right, so let's get into tubing. There's lots of different tubing you can buy. I am not advertising any of these companies. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just really showing you what's typically available, like at a Home Depot, but you don't even have to buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace Hardware, or even if the better option, honestly, in my opinion, is going to actually a drip irrigation or an irrigation location, because you'll get a much better price on everything because they're selling it wholesale. So here on top, we have a PC drip line. Now this drip line is not drip tape. Okay, so we're going to talk about drip tape, but this is a 1/2 inch in diameter, and it's thicker polyvinyl tubing. Okay, it can have, this one is rated at 1 gallon per hour, and it's pressure compensating. So that means if you have high pressure, low pressure, this drip line can take care of it. It has a flow rate of 100 gallons per hour for 100 feet. And you're probably like, oh my gosh, this is becoming so much. What is she talking about? So this is an average drip line that you can put into your backyard, and it can manage just about, if you hook it up to the spigot, this can start to drip from 12-inch emitters. So the emitters on this one are 12 inches apart. Okay, now we have tubing. The tubing on the bottom has no emitters. Okay, so if you go to a store and you're looking for a drip line, we have to be very clear. This one has emitters built in, and this one has no emitters. On this tube, you're either going to put your own emitters. Well, that's not either. You're going to have to put your own emitters, which is kind of nice because you can determine where you want to put them. Okay, this is a 1/2 inch, and this, usually they sell this in about a 200-foot maximum. Now I do want to keep in mind with both of these, when you unroll these, they're going to want to come back into a rolled shape. So usually what I would recommend is that you lay them out the day before, let the heat really soak into them, because you'll notice they'll start to flatten out. It's a little difficult to install them when they are immediately coiled. So now we're getting into drip tape. Okay, drip tape is a flat shape, and you can see here that there's an emitter within the tape. Now there's different wall thickness for drip tape. Typically in a garden home situation, you can probably go with a 5 millimeter or a 6 millimeter, and it lasts about a year. But in a garden situation, this can last much, much longer. Okay, it depends on it at the end of the season, if you roll it up or how you deal with it. But if you take care of it, it can last much longer. These thicker drip tapes are really for under, if you want to put it in subsurface. Now, this is a possibility to do that in a home garden situation. It may take a little bit more work to dig the trenches. So it's really a preference for you, what you want to do. I think in a garden situation and in a raised bed situation, you're going to get about the same result, right? In bigger fields, sometimes subsurface drip is a little bit better. So when we look at emitter spacings, this really has an impact on what you want to grow. So if you look at a 4-inch emitter spacing, this is really good for a lot of some of your vegetables, flowers, like the 4-inch spacing. And the nice thing about flowers growing at a 4-inch spacing is that you aren't just going to get one flower and then 12 inches and then another flower. They're a lot closer together. Peppers and chili like to grow on a 4-inch spacing, but typically we have them on a 6. But in a garden situation, it's nice to have them on a 4-inch spacing. 6-inch spacing is very good for onions and garlic, and I would say even corn is really good on a 6-inch spacing. 8-inch spacing is, and these all say for germination, so all of these spacings are really good for germination. Strawberries and most vegetables that we're going to grow at home would be very happy with an 8-inch spacing. 12-inch spacing is a good all-around choice, but sometimes depending on how much space you have, you may want to grow more. And so even though 12 inches, typically people are like, oh, we just plant our vegetables 12 inches apart. I would not hesitate to plant them even closer, because sometimes that can increase productivity. 6-inch spacing is for things that we typically do not grow so much of, at least in the south, in southern New Mexico. But if you're in northern New Mexico, you could try to grow some hops or blueberries if your soil has enough acidity. So drip tape, when you put it down, you want to make sure the emitters are facing up. They can be buried, like I said, if you buy the drip tape with thicker walls. Drip tape is really the best for long straight runs. So drip tape is not really good if you want to curve around and you need a lot of different angles and different things. It's really good for straight. Too much pressure can cause the tape to burst. So I've seen this over and over again. We don't want to put too much PSI or too much pounds per square inch within the tape. So if you look here, here's a table of what kind of pressure it can take. And so if you look with a 5 millimeter wall thickness, you can take about 8 PSI. And then with a 6 millimeter, you can take, depending on the size of the tape, you can take between 10 and 8. So it really is all related. But don't get too worried. You're like, oh no, okay, I have to write all this down and I have to like make sure that my wall thickness is the same as this and I'm getting all the right things. Really, any kind of drip tape that you're going to buy, either at your local irrigation store or at Home Depot, can take what you're going to give it. And so just trust in that process. But this is just here so you can really get some idea of what's going on with what you have. So there's also soaker hoses. I know this isn't specifically drip irrigation, but these are also really nice implements for the home garden. They give about a half a gallon to a gallon per hour. There's really inconsistent results with this. Like I've seen in our experiments and in my own life, that sometimes they give a lot of water in one section and not so much water in another section. So again, this is something you can really try out and see if it's something you're interested in. The nice thing about this is it's just soaking a whole area, as opposed to having one emitter and then a break and then another emitter. So now we have microtubes. Microtubes are great if you have kind of a lot of different shapes, right, that you're trying to fill in with crops or with ornamental plants. So they can really wind around and go into different places. And so that's what makes them really good. They're a 1/4 inch in diameter and they have a higher PSI rating. So these can take up to 25 pounds per square inch. And they can also be used with gravity and low pressure systems. The drip tape can be as well, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. The emitters, so these emitters, you can buy 1/4 diameter microtube drip lines with many different kinds of emitter ratings. So because I'm saying 0.5 gallons per hour on these ones, if you want more, or you typically 0.5 is the least you can go within a drip line, but you can get more water to be emitted or less. Really with these, you want to go 30 feet maximum runs. I know they sell these in 100 feet, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later. We don't want to overextend our lines because we will lose pressure at the end, and then the plants at the end of the line will not be receiving enough water. Okay, on the other side, we have 1/4 inch porous soaker hose. So the smaller soaker hose actually has better performance than the larger soaker hose. Why exactly that happens? I think it's because the pressure is more evenly dispersed because it's smaller. And so then the water is able to come out much faster. So we need to think about a design. So the first thing you think about when designing drip irrigation is a point of connection. Are you connecting to a faucet, a tap, a spigot, a gate valve? Are you connecting to a pump from a pond, a pump from a river? You know, what is your source of water? This makes a huge difference. And then we need to think whatever you're connecting to, what the flow rate is. And the way you can figure out the flow rate, and again, you can do some of this, you can do none of this. It really doesn't matter. It's just there for your information, because the nice thing about drip irrigation, you can just literally hook something onto the spigot in your backyard and you have drip irrigation. And that's just the beauty of it. It used to be very complicated and it seemed very secretive, but now people are just using drip irrigation all over the place without any hesitation. So in order to find the flow rate, you can get a 5-gallon jug or a 1-gallon jug. Sometimes if you're using the spigot behind your house or from a well, 1 gallon can fill up very fast, and it's almost faster than you can time it sometimes. So what you do is you fill it up and you just see how many seconds it takes to fill it. So in this situation, for seconds to fill a 1-gallon container, here it took 5 seconds. So now our gallons per hour are 720 gallons per hour. So if you have 720 gallons per hour and you divide that just by 60 minutes, because there's 60 minutes an hour, then that means your gallons per minute are 12 gallons per minute. Okay. So the flow rates and soil type. So depending on your soil, this really determines how much water you want to put into the soil at one time, right? If you have a lot of clay in your soil, so if you grab your soil and it really sticks together and it forms a ball, you really want to give a lower gallon per hour rate. And that's because it's going to take a long time for the water to seep out. And if you put too much water, there's the greater likelihood that the water is going to pool right around the plant. And we definitely don't want that, because it will decrease the oxygen for the roots. And then you have problems with plants not being able to, the roots not being able to respire properly. So then we have loam soil, which is kind of partially clay, partially sand. And the way it will feel in your hand is it's going to feel a little bit like it's sticking together, but not completely, where it's not feeling like the clay you would buy at the store. And so this will actually can take a little bit higher, where you go from 0.5 to 1 gallon per hour. And again, as it starts to wet, because there is more sand, the water can move faster through the soil and make a nice area around the plant. Now for sand, it's extremely porous, and so the water will just go right down to the bottom, right? The water that you're putting in is going very fast to the bottom. So you're going to have to water a little bit faster to then fill up the soil, the soil with water, so it's at field capacity, and then you would want to shut it off. All right, because we want to fill it up to field capacity, and then that's it. We don't want to give more water than needed. So there's a lot of different designs for raised beds. Here, we're going to talk about these joints that connect all of this, but here there's a grid system. So maybe each one plant can be inside of these grids, or you can have multiple plants depending on what you're growing. Here, they've attached a type of soaker hose that curves around. You could also use a micro tube to do this and achieve this. Here they have drip tape. So here you can see the main line like I had described, and here you have the drip tape lined. Again, drip tape is straight, and you can see the emitters are usually on the side where there's the lines. So again, you want that to be facing up. And here you can see it gets pretty intricate, where people are making tubes that go into an elbow, and then they go up, and then they go into the raised bed, and then they put the micro tubes down the center. So you can really go crazy. I know in my personal farm now, we have drip lines in many different ways and categories and moving all over the place. So it can be quite fun. So here they have a different design where they have a main line coming here with a PVC. So you can use PVC pipe, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the drip lines are then attached on either side of the main line. Now, if you do this, usually this person probably has very high pressure that can manage all of this at once. So on a municipal well, or even on a personal well, usually you can get pretty high, and the personal well, sometimes it can be lower. So now let's talk about gravity-fed irrigation. Gravity-fed irrigation is fantastic for a situation where you do not have access to a well or a consistent water source. This is a really phenomenal thing that is really taking traction all over the world. So what happens in a gravity-fed situation is that you have some type of tank. Okay, it doesn't even have to be a tank. It can be a bucket, whatever you want. I mean, this is even more complex, but it's just some type of container to hold water, and you lift it up, right? And for every 2.3 feet in elevation, I know this is very specific, but they have really studied this, you get 1 PSI, right? So every 2.3 feet you move up, you get 1 pound per square inch gain. So you're getting the pressure from gravity pulling down the water. So if you have something that's 5 feet up, you have 2.2 PSI. And you might be thinking, well, can that even work with the drip tape? It can, it actually can. And so they did a lot of studies in Asia and throughout the Southwest, and they found that tanks with even a 3 feet elevation, which is only 1.3 PSI, can fill lateral lengths of up to 100 feet. So this is drip tape. Usually 5 millimeter drip tape is the best for gravity-fed drip irrigation systems. And so what happens is the water then comes down with gravity, and then it comes out of the laterals. Now, how many laterals you have depends on the length. So here in this picture from this research, they have several laterals. They also have a very big tank. So it kind of is you're going to have to play around with this if you're interested in it. So maybe you set up a 55-gallon drum, you fill it up, and then you see if you can get 2 laterals or 3 laterals at a certain length. It does take a little bit of testing to look into it, but it is great. And the reason for that, why it's so great, is because you don't really, all you have to do is transport the water there, right? And so in some situations where you have a water source, but you are not able to, you want to have a big system going, you can use this device. And maybe if you own livestock, you might be familiar with this device. Usually people put these in stock tanks. And so a hose hooks up to it here, and you can put this into this tank. And so what happens is when this yellow floater goes down, the water will turn on and it will fill the tank back up. So see, it's a really cool system where if you hooked up a hose to this, then you have water coming down through the system anytime you have this on. Then you might be thinking, well, what if I don't want it on all the time? So we're going to go into timers, but this is an important thing. This Irritech timer, now I'm not doing an advertisement, but this is a very simple timer that can automate this whole system. And the reason why this is so important is because this can take low pressure. A lot of automatic timers, they need the high pressure because that's what they've been tested with, right? They've been tested on spigots, or they've been tested on different water sources that have higher pressure. And so this timer can actually manage this low 1.3 PSI system. So we talk about filtration. We talk about dirty water versus clean water. And I think if you're in the dirty water category, like you have a lot of particulates in your water tends to be a little bit murky, you probably know you have dirty water. And then versus the clean water, one is not bad, one is not good, but it depends on your source. So if you're hooked up to municipal water, or you have well water that is usually clean water. So drip emitters and sprayers need to be filtered through 120 mesh. Now, I'll tell you honestly that I don't always use filters in my drip lines, and it's fine. Okay, now if you are doing a lot of irrigation and you have a lot of drip lines and you have very dirty water, then you're definitely going to have to filter. Okay, because you will have so many clogs that you will constantly have the lines all the time, which will waste water. So again, what will happen is for drip emitters and sprayers, you need 120 mesh. Drip tape requires 155 mesh. So it's a lot closer together than this 120 because the drip tape has even smaller emitters. And so it needs to be relatively clean. So you have to check your filter monthly and clean it. And so here's a very popular filter. It's a canister filter. And so, sorry, I covered this word, but you have to make sure you have enough clearance. So let's say you're putting this onto a spigot. You can directly put this onto the spigot. The water comes through the mesh and then out, and then you have nice filtered water. To clean this, you just have to unscrew this, and then it is nice and clean. You just wash it out, and then you put it back in. So municipal drip irrigation design is slightly different than regular irrigation. Now, remember what I said, you can take or leave any of this, right? You don't really need any of this. You could just get one of those drip lines and then hook it right up to your spigot and you would be totally fine. But if you want to get into it and you want to explore all these different things, none of these things are very expensive at all. So usually in municipal drip irrigation, with municipal water, it usually has very high water pressure. And so what you're going to need is a pressure reducer, and that's what this is. And so when you think about poly tubing, that's the initial one that I showed you, that the brown one and the other ones, these can manage about 25 PSI. And then the drip tape, like I said, can manage 10 PSI. So usually out of the spigot, if you want it to run as it's supposed to run, you need to get a pressure reducer. So you can see what you're going to see with pressure reducers is they're going to tell you the flow range. This is how much they release. And then the preset operating pressure. So this can reduce it down to 10 to 40 PSI. You just have to set it. And then the maximum inlet pressure, this is the pressure that's coming out of the spigot, can be from 90 to 120 PSI. And in a municipal system, usually you're getting that much PSI. So what you can get to test the water pressure from your spigot, if you really want to get into it, is you can get this pressure gauge and you literally just put it onto the bottom of your spigot and screw it on and it will tell you. So tube length. So we had talked about this a lot, and really the tube length, if you have a 1/4 inch tubing and you want to maximum run it for 30 feet. If you have a 1/2 inch tubing, you want to maximum run it for 200 feet. 3/4 of an inch, 480 feet, and 1 inch for 960 feet. So really what this means is if you have 30 feet with a 4-inch tubing, 1/4 tube size, you're going to get 30 gallons per hour. And so this just keeps going on and on. Now, let's say in a situation, I think in the next one, into that. So let's say you wanted to have 40.5 gallon per hour drippers. So what this really is accounting for, so you have 40 times 0.5, this is 20 gallons per hour that you want to have if you just multiply 40 times 0.5. Now you have to look over here and you have to say, wow, all right, with 30 feet, I can only supply 30 gallons per hour. So yep, I can manage this amount of drippers at this gallon per hour rate. Now, again, all of this is okay, do I have to get that specific? You can. And if you get that specific, the nice thing is you are going to be releasing the amount of water onto your plants that it's exactly saying, right? If you just throw something in there, you can't really tell how much water is going on because you're doing things that the drip line is not really designed for. So fertilizer injectors, you can go from very simple and less expensive to very complex. The simple fertilizer injector, again, you don't have to do this. You can always just put fertilizer right in the soil by the plant, and then the drip line will wet it, and then the plants will take it up. But if you wanted to get into something more complex and you were really having fun, you could do these easy flows. It literally just connects to the spigot, and because of the suction that the water coming through causes, it will pull the fertilizer into the line. Here we have a Venturi suction device, so the water goes through here, and then what happens is you have a tube here like this one, it's in a bucket, and then it will actually just suck the fertilizer up and push it through. So here they have that device here, so they would turn off the main line and let the water then go through here. Here we have a dosatron. This is a hydraulic one. I don't know any home gardeners that use this, but it's just fun to know what's out there, and these can get very complicated and very expensive. But again, you can start with an easy flow injector. And this is really, probably you can buy this Venturi for less than $1. The one thing to think about with this is you need a backflow preventer. And the reason for that is because if you do not have a backflow preventer, the fertilizer can then sometimes go back into the spigot if you're using a spigot or a well or any type of water source, and we don't really want to be doing that. So a backflow preventer allows the water to go through. So the proper way to set that up is to have, let's say you have an automated timer, or even if you don't, this just needs to go directly onto the spigot, and then the fertilizer source has to be down from it. So what are we watering? If you're watering vegetables, you could use stake drippers. You don't have to. There's the emitter tubing with built-in drippers. Again, you can be watering vegetables. Really, any of these things can go for anything, but these are just some ideas. Micro bubblers, they emit lots of water, and you can change it. They can go from 0 to 13 gallons per hour. So you can reduce the flow or you can increase the flow. Sometimes cucumbers, watermelon, they really like lots of water. So you want to make a plan. I realize I'm running up against time, so we're going to have to push through. But so in this plan, we have a drip line here, a drip line here, and a drip line here. And what I would, in this plan, I would like to have all 0.5 gallon emitters here, and then 2.0 gallon per emitters here. Maybe I have gallon per hour emitters here because maybe I have stuff that needs a lot of water. And then here I have 1.0 gallon per hour emitters, right? And so the total for my whole thing, because I want to have emitter on my lines, is 42 gallons per hour. Now, if I look here, I can't use, if I'm going to do it for 30 feet, I only have 30 gallons per hour. So again, I may have to break this up, right? Or I can use 1/2 inch, and then I can use the 1/2 inch to do the whole line, right? So we want to make sure, but if you look at each line itself, like I look at this line, all of these are within the 30 gallons per hour. So if I wanted to make them 30 feet, that'd be great. But if I wanted to do one line to water all of these, I would have to go with the 1/2 inch because the 1/4 inch cannot take it in a 30 feet. So here's some of the things you'll need, and I'm not going to be able to go through these extensively, but a little bit. And I'm sorry, I really got out of control because I was so excited. So you're going to need something to punch the holes for the emitters. These two on this side. If you're going to be punching a lot of holes, I would recommend getting something like this. Again, all of these things you can buy for very cheap. I think this you can probably buy at Home Depot or your irrigation store. At an irrigation store, this will be less than $1. This could be even 25 cents, right? And these just punch in the holes to the poly tubing. You're going to need cutters, and I would highly suggest gloves because when you're putting all the emitters in, if you are putting in emitters, it can really be damaging to the hands. That's just a lot of personal experience. Automatic timers, again, you can go from the most simplistic automatic timer. This just hooks right onto the spigot or whatever water source you have, as long as it's in a 3/4 inch pipe. And if it's not, it doesn't matter. You can change the sizing with other pipes. If you go anywhere and say, I want to take a 1/2 inch pipe to a 3/4 inch, and they will have the connections to do many different kinds of things. This one, I have never seen this. This was new to me. They actually have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth connected automatic timer. So it's becoming very fancy. You're going to need a hose thread, right? So to connect onto the hose, you just need a hose thread that looks like this. If you want to use the micro tubes, you're going to need a hose thread that looks like this. Again, these are all things you can find easily at an irrigation store or online. There's tons of places that sell these. You can use compression fittings. So this will, if you need to put two pieces of the poly or the poly tubing together, this is for that. They also have elbows, they have T's. You can use barb fittings. I typically use barb fittings more than compression fittings, mostly because it can be very difficult if you make a mistake with compression fittings to pull the poly tube out of the compression fittings. These are the best, although they are a little bit more expensive. And when I say a little more expensive, maybe, 25 cents more expensive. These are tri-locking. So what happens, this is for drip tape or poly tubing. You push the drip tape on, and then you just turn this lock, and it locks in the drip tape or the poly tubing to the connector. So this is what you're going to need to connect the main line to the drip tape or more poly tape. And so what happens is you really just poke a hole with one of those hole punchers here. You push this in, and then you can attach whatever you want. They all of these usually, in my experience, are tri-locking, mostly because when the pressure pushes this out through the pipe, it will fall off if it's a barb fitting. But I have seen some people use barb fittings for this. End caps. So this is very important. You do not have to use something fancy. Typically, what I do is just roll it up at the end and then either tie something around it, and that's enough. Unless you have really high pressure. And then if you have really high pressure, that may not be enough. But this is an 8-figure end cap. Again, you just slide this in and slide it in, and that stops the water. Or you can get this end cap. Again, all of these things are not very expensive. So this is now moving to the 4th inch fittings, and I know my time, I'm going to go really fast. These are the things that connect together the 4th inch tubing. All right, so this is the connector. If you have 2 pieces of the the 4th inch tubing, remember the micro tubes, this is what you would use to connect it. And these are really important to get if you're going to get something. Goof plugs are very important, because when you punch a hole, sometimes you don't always punch it in the right place, or you want to move something. So this, you can just push it right into the hole you punched, and sometimes water will leak out, but generally it's pretty tight. Here are the different kinds of stakes you can use. I haven't had the best experience with these plastic stakes. I tend to find that they aren't as tight as I would like. So I generally use these U stakes to hold everything down. But again, once something gets water in it, generally it kind of stays in place. But if you have high winds, it's probably better to put the stakes on. So these are just 2 examples of emitters. There are tons of different types of emitters. So this is an online emitter that will just, you punch a hole into the poly tubing and you just shove that right in, and water will, you shove this right in and the water will start to emit out, just like the picture shows. Here's a little flag dripper. Again, the same idea. You punch the hole and then you push it in, and then you have water coming out. Here we have bubblers. So what happens with these is you would punch a hole, get a 4th inch connector, and then you can get a little 4th inch line that has no emitters, and you deliver the water to the bubbler. These are great for areas where you need a little bit more water than the drip can supply. So when to irrigate, you want to use the feel method. Really squeeze the soil in your hand. If you can make a ball and there's lots of water coming out, then you probably don't need to irrigate. If the soil feels dry, then you probably want to irrigate. You never want to wait until it's very, very dry, because the plants will go past the permanent wilting point and they will die. So generally we want to water early in the day or in the evening. And that's, so if you're irrigating early in the morning, it's a little bit better because we don't have as much evaporation, and the same thing happens in the evening. So I'm not going to go through all this for the sake of time, but again, you can look up the feel method, which I think is an excellent way of testing for soil moisture. Sometimes people irrigate on how the plants look, but I'll tell you, in this heat, by the afternoon, all the plants look like they need water. But sometimes they don't really need water. They're just all wilting because it's very hot. So here's some ideas how to irrigate. So this is very general, but if you can see here, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but here we have cauliflower, celery, corn, lettuce, parsnips, peas, potatoes, radishes. You can use the 1/2 inch emitter fitting. This is the first tube I showed you, or the small 1/4 emitter tubing. These plants usually need about 2 gallons per week. And so What that would mean is you don't want to give them all 2 gallons at once. You really want to separate that out, especially in hot, arid climates. I mean, look at how much this is. This is 90 minutes, 2 times a week. That's a lot of water. You have to remember that drip irrigation is not putting on a ton of water at once. So it may seem like, wow, that's a long time, but you're really not using that much water. Right at 90 minutes, 2 times a week, you can probably get about 2 gallons. Again, using the lower drippers for crops that are underground, because we don't saturate the whole soil and rot the tubes or the fruit that are growing underground. So just some ideas, and here's some things to remember. Make a plan or do not make a plan. It really doesn't matter, and that's the cool thing about drip irrigation. You can just go anywhere or even online and buy a drip irrigation kit and just play with it and see what happens. It can be a lot of fun. Again, you want to zone crops with similar water needs together, and it's best to irrigate when the plants need it versus a regular schedule. And I'm mainly saying that to myself. Israel, it is best to irrigate when the plants need it versus a regular schedule. There are many, many online resources, but just be aware that if you're looking at resources that are not from the Southwest, the conditions are going to be very, very, very different. And so just always keep that in mind and have fun. All right, so this is my email address. Please feel free to email me. I definitely know very, very little, but I would be happy to answer any questions or find someone who can answer any questions you may have.
That is a lot of information. Thank you so much.
I know. Sorry, I think I went out of control. I'm sorry, Mikkel. Don't ask me back here because I get crazy.
Do not be sorry. That's great. I mean, all of your experiences, all of the research that you've done that you're sharing, that's great. That's all great information. And especially you do have one of the questions coming from Marilyn. She asks, can you provide a list of items?
Absolutely. So what I could do is I can send that to Mikkel and then maybe that can go to you, but it also depends, Marilyn, on what you want to do. So if you have a small area, but I can provide the main list of items to you, yes, but it also depends on where you're buying them. So it becomes very complicated, but we can give you what you need. If you want to email me or talk to Mikkel, and we can I get you the information you need for what you want.
Okay, great. Like what she said, Marilyn, if you have specifically, okay, she got the message. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, is there any other questions on the presentation? If you would like, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so another question from George. Does using a fertilizer injector clog up the system?
That's a very good question. And Marilyn, I saw you have a small garden. So what I'm going to do for you is write a small list. And if you can either email me your email address, I will put together a small list for a small garden. Does fertilizer injector clog up the system? Yes, if you are not using the correct fertilizer. So there is fertilizer for liquid application, and there's fertilizer for application directly to the soil that's granular. So we do not want to take granular fertilizer and just mix it in water and think that that's enough. It's not going to work that way. What needs to happen is you get water soluble fertilizer or fertilizer that's already in a liquid form. So like a Miracle Grow that's already in a liquid form. I'm saying Miracle Grow, but that's not the only one out there. It's just the one I'm thinking off on the top of my head. So if we have water soluble fertilizer, that will not clog up the system. Maybe over time, if we're not mixing it properly before we input it, but generally it does not clog up drip lines. Now in a bigger field, sometimes they have to wash out the drip lines with different acids to try to clean them. But again, in a home garden situation, that's not really what needs to happen.
Okay, thank you, George, for your question. We are cutting it right around 6:30. So we'll go ahead and have another question if anyone is wanting to unmute themselves, or you guys can use the chat box. Okay, so I see a question from the QA section. Okay, so it's not a question, but just a comment. Coming from Kelly, seriously, learned so much. Thank you for your presentation. You did an excellent job.
Oh, well, that's kind of you. I see the one thing about from George, one more, I just want to, because
Sure.
I did not talk about this because I was kind of rushing, but the salinity issue, this is really important. And thank you for asking this. So one way we can combat the salinity issues with drip irrigation, and this is going to be kind of an interesting way, but they do this all throughout the Mid East where they use a lot of drip irrigation. So when it starts to rain, even if it's just for a few seconds, okay, if it seems cloudy and there's rain predicted, you want to turn on all your irrigation. And what will happen is then when the rain comes down, no matter how much it is, we've seen a lot of good results that when the drip is on, plus the small amount of rain, it can actually move the salinity out of the top of the soil. So it's a very good practice to irrigate while it is raining, which is kind of contrary to what we think, but it produces more water to move the salinity out from the top of the soil. And then for the real salinity issues, well, that's a much bigger conversation, and hopefully everyone working together, we can, create varieties and different methods to try to help the soil, because there are a lot of salinity issues.
Thank you, George, for all those excellent questions. Okay, so with that being said, that will conclude our Q&A section of this presentation. I just want to say thank you so much, Israel, for setting some time aside to provide this great presentation. It was very informative and I really enjoyed it. And if it's okay, coming from, well, I want to ask if I can get a copy of your PowerPoint slides, so that way we can share it on our NSA project website. I'm losing my words right now.
Absolutely. I'll send you a PDF
Yeah.
right away.
Okay, that's fine. That works as well. Thank you everyone for joining us. I did release a poll. So if you guys that are still on here, it would be great to gather your input on today's presentation. And that will conclude this evening's presentation. And Israel, you're more than welcome to stick around. We're just going to be talking about some upcoming events and other further events as well. So you can go ahead and leave the Zoom, or you can stick around.
All right. Thank you so much, Mikhail. I appreciate being invited, and thank you all. And I wish you all the best evenings. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay. So while I'm gathering all of those polls from you guys, I just want to inform you that next week we will have developing a livestock vaccine and deworming schedule for both cattle and sheep. And this is virtual webinar. It will be on August 16th. Like all of our webinars, they'll start from 5:30 and through 6:30. And presentations by, I put Dr. Israel, so that's not correct. My apologies on my side. But this will be presented by Dr. Marcy Ward. She's the New Mexico State University livestock specialist. So if you want to revert to this flyer here, it's correct, and all the information is correct. And if you are a livestock producer, you can take out your phone now, and you're more than welcome to scan this QR code right here where my mouse is circling, and it should direct you to a registration page. So if you scan that QR code and plug in your information, it will send you a link that you'll be notified that on August 16th is the day for this webinar. So with that being said, that concludes our upcoming events. And just to let you guys know, once again, we do have a conservation planning program that we collaborate with Dene College Land Grant Office, and we provide one-on-one technical assistance. We also provide conservation planning workshops in Eastern and in Northern Navajo agencies. So if you are wanting to do a one-on-one tech assistance and helping you guys develop a conservation plan, please email us at nsaproject@nmsu.edu, or you can head to our website at nsa.nmsu.edu. So here's our website. If you just punch in this nsa.nmsu.edu in your URL, it should pop up this main page. From there, you'll see all the tabs on the right. Under Conservation Planning Program, if you click that, it will direct you to our Conservation Planning Program tab. You can find all of our information there, to our checklist, to our Dene College templates, to Northern templates, and request forms, and so much. And we also have our upcoming events registration on there as well for next week's webinar. And our webinars and workshop, this is where all of our information as far as our recordings of our presentations, they go under webinars, and their publications, presenters publications, and their PowerPoint slides are all on under webinars and workshops. And lastly, USDA programs. This is just a directory for those that are residing in the McKinley, San Juan County, sorry, and Cibola counties. Their information to the NRCS and the FSA programs are all located under that directory. Newsletters as well. So if you want to subscribe to our newsletters, click that tab and it will direct you to all of our past newsletters, our previous ones, and a link to where you can get registered, or I should say subscribe. But other than that, thank you all for joining us. Share all this information with producers that you know, and we have a YouTube channel. So if you may have missed a presentation before, just let you know that every webinar of ours are recorded and posted. And follow us on our Facebook page. And if you guys need any information as far as conservation planning programs and how to navigate that website, let us know. Our contact information is right below monthly newsletter. So Jesse and myself, email are on there as well. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a good rest of your night. My name is Mikal Lantana. I am the program specialist for the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. So just to let you guys know, we're known as Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. In short, we call it the NSA project. We're funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Native Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Program. An abbreviation is a bit confusing, but what it stands for is OASD-VFR. So it's a bit of a long abbreviation, but that's who we're funded by. And we're also in collaborative effort with the New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service from New Mexico State University. And we're also partnered with two of our main project partners, Dene College Land Grant Office and COPE, which stands for Community Outreach Patient Empowerment. So you see a lot of their two logos on all of our flyers, our sign-in sheets, our evaluations, and so much more, because they play a big role with us when they partner with us, especially for in-person workshops. And you see a lot of their presentations coming from Dene colleges, such as record keeping and conservation planning, as well as COPE, who you guys may have been familiar with, Carol Palmer, who is an excellent resource when it comes to a lot of vegetable gardening practices that you can implement. So if you want to check their programs out, they're located on Facebook, and some of the presentation they're provided as well. They're located on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So you can check out their presentations from there too. So going straight into our goals and objectives of the NSA project is basically mainly to help producers improve their operations, profitability and sustainability through our educational programs and technical assistance that we provide in the following counties, which is McKinley, San Juan, and Cibola County. So to kind of expand on the educational program kind of aspect of things, we provide weekly webinars such as this. We alternate each week from livestock to gardening to livestock, then back to crops. And so we follow what our producers want to more likely attend. So from livestock management, rangeland management, soil, pollinators, what else we have? We have food and nutrition, market opportunities, backyard gardening, and farmers market, and so much regenerative agriculture. What type of programs, local programs can I apply for at the USDA office and so forth. So we host plenty of weekly presentations, which you can also find on our website as well at nsa.nmsu.edu. And I can further explain that more till the end of this presentation. We also are hosting in-person workshops as far as conservation planning. We do a lot of conservation planning. So if you are in need of assistance to develop one, I'll be discussing more on that at the end of the presentation as well. And we do a lot of in-person workshops too, starting to get out there with our project partners from soil surveying, herd health, and like I said, conservation plan. And going on to the next goal that we have is to increase our producers' knowledge and use of USDA programs and services. You guys may have known that we just recently wrapped up with our two-part USDA resource series. And that is coming from McKinley County. NRCS provided a presentation on local programs that producers can apply for, as well as FSA County Director, Levi Whitley, who did an excellent presentation on what type of local programs that producers can apply for here. And services, those of other resource providers such as the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. And lastly, but not least, increase the local production and consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, healthy foods by Navajo families and individuals through our gardening program.